702.
Talk at 9. SMS Gushwell on 31702.
Good evening, Howard. How are you doing?
Good evening. How you doing?
Great stuff, man. You know what? I think it's something that we all need, especially, and I said, Sunday is a tough show to do, man, because people are going to work the next day. The week starts again. Very few people are very excited about, Monday morning. Unless, of course, you won the lotto over the weekend and you're going to tell your boss, where to stuff it. On that Monday morning. But apart from that, we also want to go through all the news and all the events and all the serious stuff that's happened during the course of the week and, of course, over the weekend. So it's always a tough show to do. But you're going to help me out a bit tonight because you're going to help me out with a bit of optimism. Is there space for optimism at all?
Well, I think it's not to say that there's space for optimism. There's an absolutely desperate need for optimism. And no matter where you go in South Africa at the moment, there's this we're batting away pessimism and negativity all the time. And it's not to say that there aren't reasons to face some of those difficulties. I was thinking exactly what you're saying is that you don't get a more difficult slot at 10:38 on a Sunday night to talk about optimism. Because really, then this is probably the most difficult time because people do naturally feel, oh gosh, now we've got another 5 days to get through before the weekend. But I think we do have to turn that around and look at things differently and say, how about looking at it like we've got 5 days to do that which we want to do? There's a clean slate, there's an empty canvas, a blank canvas in front of us, and let's go out and make this week count. And of course, we've all got difficult things, we've all got troubles that we face, but we've got to, and that's some of the things I deal with in the book, is we've got to learn to try and understand what makes us happy. And it isn't just about the material assets that we might have, and how good we're looking, but it's really about something. It's about finding your fulfillment and finding a mission in life. That happiness really does come from the inside. In fact, recent research shows us that if we let's say start off at this level of happiness, let's say this is a 5, and we go and buy ourselves a beautiful brand new car or a beautiful watch or whatever it would be, we peak in happiness, but then within about 32 days, we're back to where we are right now. But if we go at this level of 5 and we have a fantastic experience and we do something really wonderful with family or friends and loved ones, it takes a year for that to or at least many months for that to slowly dissipate and come back to the level that we were at. So what we have to realize, and somehow we don't, because we want that quick fix of something that's going to make us happy for a very short while, almost like eating sugar. So our sugar spikes, but then we come right down, rather than looking at the things that truly make us happy. And we have to start finding a way. There's this whole concept that we don't know what we've got till it's gone. Well, that's a terrible way of learning to appreciate things. Let's rather appreciate them and appreciate the people in our lives and the very good things that we do have every day.
So let's take a step back, because I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying in terms of finding that inner optimism and where you're going to find the optimism. That's really what I was looking at, or looking for, is that where does one find this optimism? And I was just, as you were speaking, there's sort of this list of things that people ordinarily turn to, for lack of a better term, in search of optimism. So there's faith for some, there's family for others, there's material things, there's sort of that inner journey or the inner thing, etc., etc. There's a whole long list of things that people sort of resort to, and I'm sure it sounds to me like you're not sort of prescribing a particular method, a particular thing.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, there's so many pitfalls in so many spaces. Faith has led some, I'm not saying all, definitely not all, I think a few, to, for example, eating grass and drinking petrol and having doom sprayed in their faces. I'm thinking of a couple of other people who, in terms of family, they inverted commas, put all their eggs in one basket, which one expects one to do when in a family committed relationship, but then that disappoints, and so on and so forth. So there's all these things that sort of crumble. Careers, people have these massive careers, and then one day your boss comes to you and says to you that, listen, thanks for everything you've done, but we have to retrench you. Things aren't working out anymore. So what I'm just getting at is that there's all these things that can just sort of come back and bite you in the face. So is there that one thing that you look for that's not going to disappoint you and break your heart?
All right, so it's an absolutely fantastic question, because you've hit on really the difficulty in finding a simple solution for people's issues. And I want to tell you a story that I talk about in the book, which is a very, very simple story, but I think it might shed light on this in some way and give you the answer that I have. And the story is attributed to Sigmund Freud. It's not 100% clear if, in fact, it was his story, but it's very powerful nevertheless. It tells a story of Freud who's walking in Vienna at night, and he sees his friend bending down and looking for something under a gas light, which was a street light at the time. So he looks for it, and he says to his friend, "What have you lost?" And he says, "I've lost my pocket watch." And he says, "Well, let me help you find it." And they look and they look and they search. And after about 20 minutes, Freud says to him, "Are you sure you've lost it here? Let's maybe retrace your footsteps and see that you actually did lose it here." So the friend looks at him and he says, "No, but I didn't lose it here." So Freud says, "Then why are we looking here?" And he says, "Because it's light here. I don't want to look where it's dark. I'll never find it over there where it's dark." And of course, we laugh at the absurdity of it, which is exactly what you're just doing.
Exactly.
But the reality is that sometimes, in order to be in the light, in order to find happiness and joy and positivity, we've got to go into that dark space. What am I saying about this? I'm saying to you that it doesn't matter. What you've done is you've said, well, what about family and religion and material? These are possible solutions that could make me happy. I'm saying put those aside completely. Go back into your space and understand who you are. Because when you're sitting in a meeting, in a boardroom, at a meeting, and somebody says something and you react inappropriately, you're triggered by something, that's coming from your dark place and that's making you unhappy. So let's go back into your place, understand who you are as a person and what your stuff is. Deal with that, because our emotions follow our thoughts. And they follow an experience that we might have had, so we try and decode it. We're sitting in a meeting and somebody says something, or a family member or a friend said something, and we triggered automatically. And why we triggered is because we've got a thought process that evokes an emotion. And I'm saying that makes us unhappy, and at the same time that can make us happy if we access that. So I'm saying it might well be that religion is what fulfills you and fills you and becomes part of your life's journey. And it might be something else. The classic book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, is an unbelievable text, because it talks about finding meaning in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. Why is that so important? Is that it shows us no matter what situation we're in, if you find a purpose in life, if you find a mission, if you find that thing that makes you happy, then you are not happy, fulfilled, then ultimately you will be happy. And as South Africans, we spend so much time complaining. And we do have things to complain about. We do. When we look at the corruption that's been, we look at the frustration around poverty, inequality, the fact that the land discussion's gone on for so long, the fact that we're just not coming right, that the people of this country are suffering under a very unjust way. Of course, there's reason. But at the same time, there's also an incredible amount. If we look at where we are today versus 6 months ago, versus a year ago, yes, things actually have improved. So we've got to be able to take stock in a positive way as we go through things, find a different way, almost become a master storyteller in our own way and in our own lives. And it doesn't mean delude ourselves, but it actually, I'm sure any of your listeners can do this. You go on holiday and you come back, and if I ask you to write everything that was bad about that holiday, you'll be able to fill a full page of it and not lie. And then I'll ask you to write everything that was good about it. You'll fill a full page and not lie. And it's just how we look at it. It's just how we focus on it.
Very true.
And that's what I believe is so important.
I mean, I like what you're saying. And I mean, especially going back to it is, this idea that there is no formula, because let's be honest there, how it is that you could have written a book that has that perfect formula, that one thing that we all need to do that solves the problem. Because guess what? That's what people tend to look for, and that is what people buy, and that's what a lot of other people are selling at the moment, which is quite frankly a crock of what it is. I don't want to lose my job. But I mean, at the same time, people do that, and unfortunately, I think in today's digital age of, tweets and
instant,
everything is instant, everything is quick. I want it now. I want the answer now. I want to feel better now. I want to enjoy whatever it is I'm enjoying immediately. I want the perfect job. I want the perfect husband, wife, / whatever. Kids need to be perfect, etc., etc. And there is no room for sort of having to sit back and say that, where do I find that peace within myself?
Absolutely. And I think that as things are evolving, we talk about the so-called fourth industrial revolution. I think this is going to become more and more important. What's tragic is we are seeing an increasing amount of depression across the world. It's not just our own country. We're seeing an increasing amount of people being victims of suicide. We are seeing terrible loneliness, as much as we are living in the age of social media. So we shouldn't be lonely. And of course it's trite. We all know this. Everybody says that. You see the memes saying, we're lonely, even though we've got thousands of Facebook friends. But the reality is that we're not being filled. And unless we find a way to fill ourselves, and no one else is going to fill us. And I think that's also a very stark lesson. But once we get to that, it's a very powerful lesson that we fill ourselves. And we are responsible for our own happiness. Yes, we might have spouses and partners and friends and everybody else, but the reality is that we are responsible for our own happiness. And we've got to find it. No one is going to be able to fill a void that isn't fillable. So we've got to turn inward. We've got to understand our own stuff.
I hear you. So, I mean, let's look at the book again, just in terms of what it is that I can walk away with. Because, I mean, as you said, it's looking for that inward thing at the same time. You're not sort of playing Dr. Know-It-All, and I will prescribe exactly what you should do and how you should go about it.
Right.
I mean, how do I walk away from smiling, damn it.
Right. Right. Well, I'm hoping that the book will at least give some tools and a different way and a different perspective of looking at how to find positivity. I think the first thing that we want to establish is it good to be an optimist or a pessimist? Many people that are pessimists are quite happy in that space. And then the other question is why we are drawn to negativity. Then on social media, I actually commissioned a study when I was writing the book, and it was fascinating to see. I asked an expert to look at the amount of time that we talk about bad news versus good news. And what I found was the good news stories trend for about 24 hours on social media, but the bad news actually lasts for about a week. Now that's very, very interesting.
That is fascinating.
That means we're drawn to negativity. We're drawn to bad news. I've got a chapter that talks about spring, why we hate spring. In conversations when I write an article or I talk about it on radio and I say, let's make spring the 1st of August, people get cross with me. Now, in Johannesburg, there's no reason not to. We've got the most beautiful weather. But the reason is that people feel safer in winter, because winter doesn't disappoint us. Winter's meant to be cold. Nothing's meant to grow. But the minute we say to ourselves, let's make it spring, then we risk being disappointed if it's cold. So we've got to be a little bit more courageous.
Gee whiz. I mean, that for me is the height of pessimism, where you would fight spring,
But we do. That's the amazing thing. So we talk about we talk about the negative so much more. We're much happier in a negative space, and that's what we have to fight. Optimism can be learned, same as helplessness is learned.
Very true, actually. I mean, thinking about what you're saying there about helplessness in particular, because that for me is the one struggle I'm fighting, and I think for people that have been listening to me long enough, that is the one that bothers me in particular, where we sort of just retreat into our little shell because guess what? It's bad. Life is bad and things are just, nothing is ever going to work out. And, I'm poor, I'm disenfranchised, I'm this, that, and the other, I'm unemployed, and, therefore...
I hope I can solve this for you.
Uh-huh.
Because let me tell you how this works. There's a guy by the name of Martin Seligman. He's considered to be the father of positive psychology. And in the 1960s, what he did was he did experiments with dogs. And just to be clear, the dogs weren't permanently. It was uncomfortable for them. I know people get quite upset with this story, but what he did was he tied little electrodes to the bottom of the paws of dogs, and he rang a bell and switched on the electrodes. So it made them uncomfortable. The first set of dogs, there was a side panel that they could hit, and they learned that they could hit it, and that would switch off the electrodes. Okay. And he did this over and over again. He then took another set of dogs, tied these electrodes to their paws, rang the bell, switched it on, but there was nothing that they could do. It lasted about 60 or 90 seconds, and it ended. He then put both dogs in a little pen where the floor was electrified, but there was a little wall that they could jump out of if they wanted to. He rings the bell, switches on the floor. Some dogs jump to escape and others don't. And obviously, exactly what we expect to happen happens. The dogs that had learned that they could stop the electric shocks jumped and escaped. The dogs that didn't learn, that had learned and had the experience that there was nothing that they could do to end it, just sat it out and waited, even though there was a very simple solution to their problem. They could just jump over. And that's how we are. We learn situations, a bad relationship, a failed business venture, a failed anything, teaches us the terrible thing it does is teaches us to be helpless. So I often talk to business people and I say to them, worse than the money that you lose in a bad business venture is the experience that you have because you learn helplessness. But the same as helplessness can be learned, so can optimism. And I'll give you an example of where we learn not to be helpless, and that is with the flu. Why with flu? Because every year or every second year we suffer from flu.
Exactly.
But we get better. And we know that when we have flu, we might feel terrible. And I know that I behave very badly, but I can't talk about
Hey, it's the man flu. We know it's more lethal for men, for goodness sake.
Exactly. It's a terrible
thing.
We
suffer.
We do suffer. We do suffer, damn it. But no matter how much how terrible we feel, we know we're going to get better. Why? Because we've got better every single time before that. And that is learned positivity in a strange way. So I'm saying to you, the same as we learn positivity, we learn helplessness. And we've got to be able to fight that and not just assume because your last relationship was poor or because your last business venture was difficult doesn't mean that all your future ones are going to be. We've got to find a way of looking at each situation with optimism, even if it's hard to do.
What I took out of that conversation is that we should celebrate every single man that's ever survived the flu.
and the women who have survived alongside them, I tell you that.
Of course, especially in Women's Month. But I mean, I find it fascinating what you're saying there, because I do think that, there is so much that we can be negative about. I mean, going back to the origin of our conversation, I mean, if you think about the corruption, if I think about the, the difficulties that we have as a society just overall. I mean, and then sadly enough, a lot of the work that I do, during the week in other spaces deals with the difficulties, the sadness, the tough bits of life. It's never the uplifting chocolatey bits. It's always the bottom of the barrel crusty stuff that's just not nice to talk about and think about and all of that other jazz. But that is part of our reality. And I think that for us right now, it is a desperate time indeed. I mean, based on what you had said, to get through this process, to get to the other side and actually find something to be optimistic about.
Well, you're absolutely right, and what I'm going to say sounds it's going to sound it's strange, but we lived in, as a family, we had spent some time living in the United States. And one of the reasons that I couldn't bear to live there was because nobody faced adversity. Well, people, certainly where we were living, you didn't come across adversity at all. And I think to live in an environment where you don't come across adversity makes you a very, very callous person because you don't develop empathy. And as terrible as it is in South Africa, because there are people that are asking for handouts on many and most street corners, what it does is it actually teaches us to be sensitive to other people. It teaches us care, and it gives us the opportunity to actually make a real difference in somebody's life. So although, of course, I'm by no means saying that it's wonderful that we've got poverty in this country, what I'm saying is this is our circumstance. We didn't cause this. It is what it is, but and we certainly should be active citizens to fight all of this. But at the same time, we should take what we have and use that to uplift people and uplift ourselves and teach our children the values, because that's what's around us. And obviously it's something that we all will wish and pray that we don't have, and that people aren't suffering in this country. And of course the reason for it that people are suffering makes us all angry. But the reality is that we've got opportunities to actually do good, and that feeds back into society, and ultimately that makes us happy and other people happy.
And I think that's a good point that you're raising there, because that's part of the issue, isn't it? Is that this is exactly the type of stuff that should spur us on to be better people, yes, and to be part of that solution. It doesn't mean that you are going to be the one that solves global poverty on a grand scale, or let alone national poverty on a grand scale. But at the same time, it makes you aware of it. And if it upsets you, if it is something that depresses you, if it is something that worries you, then it's something that you can have an impact on in a small way. You can start doing something about it.
There's that story, which is, I'm sure, hopelessly untrue, but it's very powerful nevertheless. There's a guy's walking along a beach and he sees a young girl, and thousands of starfish have been stranded, and she's picking up one and throwing it back, and smiling as she does, and the next and the next. And the guy says, what do you think you're doing? You're making no difference. There's still thousands of here. And she picks up the next one and she says, it makes a difference to this one, and she throws it back in.
No, that's awesome.
And the point. And that's such a great idea, because everyone we help, it actually does make a difference, and it feeds back and becomes a cycle.
We'll have to leave it there.